and I should start the recording. So we routinely record our meetings for the educational value of the speakers first and foremost, so they can go back and see how they really did. I have to go back and see how many times I really said and ah. It's usually a lot. We use this video sometimes in our public relations and social media outreach, and we will definitely be making a big deal out of tonight's presentation. So we want to welcome you to Online Presenters Toastmasters. This is a club that meets online, but also is specifically focused on learning skills for better webinars and online events. Well, you're in the middle of the contest right now. Here are our celebrity judges. We'll be talking about them more in just a moment. We always want to take a moment to thank RingCentral for allowing us to use the RingCentral Meetings online meetings platform at no charge. It's very nice of them. They do also want me to let you know that the cloud is winning in business communications and RingCentral is winning in the cloud. We recommend that when you're in an online meeting that you use a headset, or in a pinch, earbuds will do plugged into your computer just so there's no audio feedback. Also mute your mic when it's not your turn to talk. There's a control in the lower left-hand corner for muting and unmuting yourself. So from time to time I may mute everybody, but if you really need to speak up, you can unmute yourself and speak up when you need to. You can also toggle your video on and off, but we want to see you. We want to feel like we're in this virtual space together. One thing about our environment is there are actually two views, and each of you has control over what you see. You can either see the active speaker, which is probably what you want to see when people are presenting, or you can see the rogues gallery of everybody who is participating. There is also a detail that's very important for the speakers tonight, because in order to keep one particular video feed in view, it helps to use this pin video feature. So if you pin the video of the timer, it will be much easier for you to see if they are giving you green, yellow, and red indicators to show you where you are in your progress of running out of time. For folks who are visiting and are interested in becoming a member, we do ask you to attend at least 2 meetings as a guest. We want you to understand that this is an advanced club. It's not intended for absolute beginners. Sometimes the people who are absolutely just getting started in Toastmasters or public speaking overall will direct to another club to get their feet wet. However, we do have a mechanism for making exceptions where people might have other professional experience that's very relevant, and with a vote of the board, we can make an exception to our usual minimum Toastmasters experience requirement. With that, it is showtime, or it's almost showtime. We'll start right at 8 o'clock. Is there any other business that we need to cover before we get started, folks? Anything folks want to bring to my attention?
Contesting question.
Yes.
Lou.
Lou, go ahead.
The speech or webinar itself is 6 to 8 minutes, and does that include or exclude Q&A?
That includes Q&A. So it's up to you to decide how much of that time block you're going to use for Q&A. We want you to use some of it because you'll get points for how well you handle that audience feedback.
Thank you.
And that was really the rationale for making it 6 to 8 instead of 5 to 7.
David, this is a good time, a good segue to let all the contestants know, and actually let everybody to know, once the speaking starts, our chat box, if you're not aware, in the control on the bottom, you can click on chat. The chat box will open up. Please reserve that spot only for questions about the speaker. Chris has the toughest job tonight. She's going to monitor that chat monitor. If there is 200 questions popped in at the same time for that one speaker, she is going to do her magic and pick out 2 or 3 and bring them together and send it back to our speaker. And so the speaker has to control how many questions they want to take. Chris is going to help you relay the questions back to you. She's going to speak concisely and quickly and clearly so that you can have as much time as possible. So
maybe this would actually be a good time to ask, is there anybody who does not want to use Chris's services? Do all the speakers want Chris to help them out, or do some of you want to just keep an eye on the chat yourself?
I think I'll try and watch the chat myself in real time based on the kind of presentation I'm doing.
All right.
All right, Chris, that is John Quick. John Quick will handle his own questions.
All right. Sounds like that might be the only exception. Very brave, and I hope not foolish as a decision, John, so best of luck to you. Well, I think we're actually ready to get started. And so let's do that. So thank you for joining us for the mini webinar contest at Online Presenters Toastmasters. My name is David Carr. I chartered this club with some help from my friends a little more than a year ago and have been serving since then as president. Tonight I will be your contest master. This is not an official Toastmasters contest format, though maybe it should be. We thought it was important to hold a contest specifically built around the elements that make a professional webinar or online presentation effective. That means contestants will get points for things like good visual presentation, which could include their body language, but also includes other things like any slides they might want to share or any other visual elements, as well as fielding audience questions that come in via chat, which is often how it works in a professional webinar. This event is an experiment, but we've tried to devise a format and a scoring formula that will be fair and that we can have some fun with. We'll follow most but not all of the rules associated with a standard Toastmasters contest. One exception is the traditional anonymity of the judges. We will have 3 guest judges with us tonight who I want to introduce you to. Our chief judge, Roger Fung, came up with the idea that we should add a little Dancing with the Stars celebrity judge pizzazz to the feedback our contestants will get on their performances, in addition to whatever prize they might win tonight. Now, I must start by introducing Roger Corville because he was instrumental in helping us get the club off the ground. Roger is the Chief Content Officer at Event Builder and an authority on online presentations of all sorts. His workshop on webinar skills was the centerpiece of our first meeting after the club chartered. And for weeks prior to that, we used the marketing of his appearance as a reason why guests should visit us and people should join. Now he's come back to see if we've amounted to anything in the meantime. So welcome, Roger. You want to say a few words?
Unmute, Roger.
I unmuted you.
There we go. If you go to the chat on the right-hand side, instead of me talking about myself, I'll let the link take you to a bio. That's one of the things we can do online, a heck of a lot easier than we can do offline. And then what I'll say is this. Having written multiple books, including here's my most recent, from our little company, we produce about 800 webinars a month with Event Builder and our 20 event producers. But I will say this, I will put a link to that book, the digital version, for free with no opt-in form, meaning you don't have to join my mailing list to get a digital copy of that. That's your incentive to stick around to the very end. Back to you, David. Thank you.
All right. Let's see. And Cheryl Rush, I'm going to unmute you as well. Now Cheryl is very well known throughout the Toastmasters world. She's the CEO of Sparkle Presentations, a professional speaker, and the author of books like Heart of a Toastmaster. In her consulting practice, Cheryl works with organizations to boost morale, inspire engagement, and of course, improve communication. She's an accredited speaker, which is an elite designation professional speakers in the Toastmasters world, and has judged contests at all levels, including the World Championship of Public Speaking. Cheryl visited Online Presenters just in January to talk about how to connect with any audience. So thanks for agreeing to help tonight, Cheryl.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me back. It'll be curious to see how our speakers are implementing exactly that information, because there's 7 different types of multiple intelligences and how to connect with your audiences. So I'm watching you tonight.
All right. All right. We'll see if folks have learned those lessons. Now, our third guest judge, Nick Cavalencia, tells me he has delivered more than 1,000 webinars. And in reality, he's probably lost count. In his work as a technology marketer at the consulting firm he founded, Techvangelism. Nick's a professional contact of mine. He's not somebody I know through Toastmasters. I don't think he's been a Toastmaster, but I invited him to give our contestants practical feedback, and I was delighted when he immediately said yes. Thanks for being here, Nick.
Oh, it's an honor, absolutely an honor. You guys are going to have a lot of fun today. My suggestion to you up front is just relax, be yourself. You know your topic, you know your audience, so just enjoy yourself. Don't worry about the fact that we're scoring you. That's all done in the spirit of trying to give you, real positive feedback to give you a way to be better at what you're doing today. So enjoy yourself.
Excellent. So we'll hear from our guests again after the speeches, but before the winners are announced. Thank you to all the rest of our volunteer judges who are just as important to making this contest work. If anybody wants to protest something about the content of this contest, however informal it may be, please direct your objection to me via the private chat, and I'll relay it to Chief Judge Roger Fung. We set it up that way because he may actually duck off into a separate online meeting room to count the votes and make sure everything's squared away at some point. And now it's time to hear from our Chief Judge Roger, who will explain a few things about how this is going to work.
Thank you, David, Mr. Contest Master. This is the briefing time for all of our contestants. The timing of your speech will be 6 to 8 minutes with a 30 seconds plus or minus Q&A inclusive within that 6 to 8 minutes. Jim Gold is our timer, and he will be showing those timing flag at the 6-minute mark, 7-minute mark, and the 8-minute mark. As mentioned earlier, it is best for you to pin his video so that it always appears in front of you. During the contest presentation, everyone other than the contestants should have their audio muted. David will also be monitoring that. Contestants have the option of using Chris, and other than Jim and John Quick, who have mentioned that he will monitor his own chat, everyone else will be using Chris's assistance. All the audience members, everyone in this call, except our contestants, are encouraged to submit questions in the chat box during the time of the speech. Chris will then look at those questions and relay them to our contestant. We will allow a 1 minute in between each speeches for our judges to add their scores. And we will show you a little bit later of the things that David have created to help scoring. We have our 3 celebrity judges, but we also have a undisclosed number of secret judges behind. So they are not the only voters. So they know who the secret judges know who they are, and all those voting ballots and numbers will all come together at the end. We'll show you what is going on. During that 1 minute, we will try to keep as much as silence as possible. However, the next contestants can go ahead and start preparing themselves if they need to set up slides and things like that, so that we can make our time, keep our time as tight as possible. Our contestants are expected to deliver an original presentation. Any protests, as David said, should be sent privately, a private chat to David Carr. And here are the speaking order. Number 1, Lou Brown. Number 2, John Quick. And number 3, Gene Morelli. Number 4, Carol Paretsky. Number 5, Jim Barber. Number 6, Norman Dow. The order once more. Number 1, Lou. Number 2, John. Number 3, Morelli. Number 4, Carol. Number 5, Jim. Number 6, Norman. Contest masters, all of our contestants are here. All of our secret judges are here. Back to you. We're ready to begin.
All right. And I think traditionally in a club contest, we allow a minute of silence before the first speaker. I think we're going to bypass that. Although, Lou Brown, I did want to ask, and this is a question for everybody, in terms of working with the chat monitor, would you want Chris to interrupt during your speech, or do you want to hold questions for a period near the end?
Good question. I don't mind having questions as we go along, but I think as webinar host, I will take it upon myself to self-limit should there be an overwhelming number of questions. Does that make sense?
That sounds good. Let's I'm going to click the mute all button one more time, and then I'm going to introduce you, Lou. And I will unmute you. All right, here we go. Our first speaker, Louis Brown. Finish what you started. Finish what you started. Louis Brown, you're on, sir.
Have you ever started a New Year's resolution, a project, or a goal only to quit not long thereafter? I know I have. And as I thought about it, I thought, you know, the reason why I might fail at some of the goals or projects that I've undertaken could be varied. And to really understand why I failed at some of those ventures, I thought a good idea to share with you some of the research that I learned as a consequence of my own failed attempts at various ventures. Now, for example, I've had several different goals in life. I'm sure many of you have as well. One of them is starting a business. Another could be getting more fit. Another is losing weight, etc. Now, as I mentioned, it is interesting how most people fail at what they do. So in order for me to understand why I myself kept failing, I wanted to get a better understanding so that I could certainly not fail at the next venture that I undertook. So with this presentation, I'm going to share with you several things for your own dreams, wishes, resolutions, goals, etc., so that you can get a better understanding of failure and certainly overcome it and hopefully eliminate it so that you can finish what you started. Now, specifically, I'm going to talk about the failure cycle, 3 reasons for failure, and with each reason that I talk about, I'm going to give you a little bit of advice on what you can do to overcome those challenges or those reasons why we may fail. Now, it's interesting to note that most people fail at most things they do. Failure is unfortunately endemic in our society. So again, it is very important to understand why we fail so that we can reduce the chances of failure and most certainly try to eliminate it completely. So first, let me share with you the failure cycle. What is the failure cycle? Well, the failure cycle starts off with a project, a resolution, a goal, anything we have in life. We begin the cycle by being excited. We are excited about the goal because we have something new we're working on. It's something that is life-changing and certainly in a positive way. It is something that will bring us pleasure in life and make our lives better. And we see the end in sight. We see a goal. There is something that we can achieve. We are very excited about it. It's just incredible that we are embarking on this journey. But something happens not long after we get started. Unfortunately, we start to exhibit some avoidance behavior. We start to avoid the things that we need to do to succeed. We put off, we defer, or we delay the things that are necessary for us to achieve that goal, or to satisfy that dream, or to make that resolution come true. Now, with continued avoidance, unfortunately comes excuses. We start to make excuses for why we are avoiding working on our goals and our dreams. And there are many types of excuses one may use. Oh, I'm too tired. Oh, I don't have enough time. Oh, I got something else I need to work on. Interestingly, time, the one about not having enough time, is a very interesting one because we all have the same amount of time. I have the same amount of time as you. We all have the same amount of time as successful people in the world, and yet many people are achieving their goals and are attaining success and reaching their potential while others aren't. Now, with continued making of excuses, we start to blame. We blame others for why we are not achieving our goals. Oh, it's the government of the day, it's the administration, it's that Toastmaster meeting I have attended, it's getting in the way of my needing to work on my fitness, or it's family, economics. It could be anything. We just simply put our blame on other people. However, quite interestingly, if you point the finger of blame at someone else, what's really happening is the blame really falls on you, not on them. If you just picture yourself for a moment holding your hand like a gun with a finger pointing out at somewhere else, you'll easily see that there are 3 fingers pointing back at you. So in reality, you are responsible for your own failure. No one else is. Now, the thing is, intermittent failure isn't so much a problem. In other words, many people fail as we go through life with things such as a child learning to walk, someone learning a new language, but it isn't the intermittent failure that is the problem. It is the chronic failure. It's getting excited about something and then starting to avoid, making excuses and blame, and doing this over and over and over again for the same goal that we're working on. We're simply repeating ourselves and not achieving that goal. John Wooden said that failure is not fatal. It's the failure to change that may be. So we learn from our failures, and we learn what to do in order to not fail. Now, there are 3 things I'm going to share with you for reasons for failure. The first is a lack of motivation. Now, motivation itself is based on pleasure. We get pure pleasure out of accomplishing a goal. Now, a goal must also bring with it a real reward. By having such a reward in this pleasure, it releases dopamine, a neurotransmitter in our brain. It gives us excitement. It gives us that passion. It increases our abilities to create a strategy, a plan around achieving that goal. So when you think about your goals, do you think about the hard work or the annoying tasks that you want to do to accomplish that goal? Or do you think about the benefits that you will receive once you finish that goal? It's a trade-off, and it's very important to keep in mind those benefits in order to stay on track. If you find yourself lacking energy, simply visualize the benefits that you'll receive from working on that goal. And when you have to think about the reward that you're going to achieve, and give yourself a pat on the back every time you complete a certain milestone. So even for those very long-term goals, it's important to keep in mind that for certain milestones along the way, congratulate yourself, celebrate your success. And the more you associate your goals and dreams with positive emotions, it's the less that you'll have to force yourself into working on those things that you don't want to work on. Now, the second item is negative self-talk. This is simply that chatter that goes on in our brain, moment after moment, time after time. I can't, I'm not good enough, I can't do it. Very, very important to eliminate negative self-talk. You need to take yourself out of talk. This is where you talk yourself out of trying, and it's actually a normal part, though, of our normal daily functioning, but it really acts like a defense mechanism, or has in many years ago in the evolution of mankind. But these days, it's really not a good thing. You need to eliminate that self-talk from your inner voice. How do you do that? Well, there's a couple of things you can do. First of all, you can write down every reason you don't want to accomplish that goal. Then next to that, write down a second list of everything, every reason that you do want to accomplish that goal. Now review both lists and ask yourself the following questions. Am I passionate about this goal? Will this goal change my life in a positive way? And are my negative thoughts valid? And you'll find out that really most of the time they are not. By having your thoughts on paper, this gives them less power over your brain. When you aren't thinking negative thoughts, your brain is now free to focus on those goals and the promise of rewards and outcomes. Now, when you feel that dark cloud starting to hang over your head, simply check your thoughts, let them out on paper, and let them go. Our third reason for failure is lack of discipline and commitment. Now, if you're not committed to achieving your goals, and you know what, just forget about it, folks. To accomplish what you started, you really must maintain a consistent willingness to persist and persevere, no matter how hard it may seem. It takes more than just visualizing or affirming your thoughts on your goals. In the coaching world, we talk about visualizing your success and even talking to yourself in your mind about being successful. But it really takes more than just that. It's all about having focus in your commitment and in your discipline, and really about taking action. Most important thing is to take action. So what can we do to help overcome a lack of discipline and commitment? Well, create an action plan for each goal. Write down any obstacles you may have and how you plan to overcome them. Have an accountability partner, very important, someone who can keep you on track. And as I mentioned in one of the earlier reasons, is catch yourself achieving. Celebrate your successes. In this way, you will be able to virtually eliminate failure, especially the chronic failure. Now, by increasing your motivation.
Excuse me, Lou. I'm sorry, I have to interrupt. You're past 10 minutes a little while ago, so we're going to have to move on to the.
Well, that was my last slide. Sorry.
Yeah, we're going to have to move on to the next speaker. All right.
You said 10 minutes, David. Is that correct?
It went fast when I practiced.
I mean, Jim, I thought you were doing 6, 7, and 8.
Chris is correct. It's 6, 7, and 8 minutes.
I thought it was 8 to 10 also.
David, we
I
can't
think that's
hear
why I
you.
asked about the Q&A. Is the Q&A in addition to or?
I'm sorry, the total is 6 to 8. Jim Gold, I'm sorry, what was the, Jim was making hand waving noises to try and tell you that you'd gone past, and we didn't quite get that through to you. So I'm sorry, we do need to move on to our next speaker. Our second speaker will be John Quick. John, do you have any logistical details? Timer, please put a minute on the clock before we start our next presentation. John Quick, do you have any logistical details that we need to address before you begin?
Sure, I just ask that people make sure I'm front and center on the screen, or even pin me so they can see what I'm broadcasting. I won't be screen sharing through the slideway, but everything will be here on my screen.
Okay. So Jim, give me a green light when we're at the end of that 1 minute.
Okay, so they have 6 to 8 minutes to speak and then questions after?
No, 6 to 8 minutes, including the time for questions. So it's tight. It's tight. That's part of the challenge. Okay. Our second speaker, John Quick, the billion-dollar live streaming industry you didn't know about. The billion-dollar live streaming industry you didn't know about, John Quick.
Thank you, Contest Master. Did you know that the same skills, plus maybe a few more, and the same technologies that we use every week in this club are part of a huge industry that's in the billions and expected to grow exponentially over the next few years. It's called live streaming. That is broadcasting multimedia in real time over the internet, sort of like we're doing right now. It all started back in 2007 with a guy named Justin. He did a little experiment called Justin.tv, where he was going to go on around the world just wearing a little webcam on his head and broadcast his entire life all day and all night. That has turned into something much bigger. What you might not have known is that a huge chunk of this live streaming industry comes from the world of gaming. I wanted to just demonstrate to you today what it's like for live streaming in a game. Let's switch over to the game. You see, I get real tiny in the corner now, and I have my video game controller. Who likes cats? Everybody. Who likes cats who can cook? Look at that steak. Soup. This is a game called Monster Hunter. What do we have to do before we hunt monsters? We got to fill up and get some energy. I'm going to head out now on a quest. Now, a live streamer, what happens here is they play games live for an audience like yourselves. I'm watching the chat. You can put in there whatever you like, and I'll try and keep up with it and respond to it. Zipline, wee! Yeah. I was a good live streamer. What I'm going to try and do here is describe some of the strategies and what I'm doing as I fight the monster. I'm going into what's called the arena. As you can see, here's a monster right down there that I have to beat up as fast as possible. I just jumped on its head. This is called mounting. I'm going to keep hitting it in the head now until hopefully it falls over. Meanwhile, I'll try and answer some questions, which I must admit is rather difficult to do while playing a fast action game like this. What is the attraction for watchers? That is the mysterious multi-billion-dollar question. The truth is there's some 30,000 people doing this at any given time, and about 1 million viewers at any given time across the two major sites, which are twitch.tv and YouTube. Now here I'll use a flash bomb to stun this guy, so he's not so dangerous to me. Then I'll just try and blow him up. How often do I kill monsters? Daily. As a monster hunter, I have to stay in good shape. This game came out in late January, and I started playing it in late February. So for the last few months, I've been hunting lots of monsters. I see someone has kids who watch live streaming. How much money is made? Lois, I would say right now there are a few hundred people, possibly reaching the thousands, who make their entire income off of just doing this right here. So out of those 30,000, we're talking a smaller percentage who actually use it for their income. And they can make quite a lot of money, in the hundreds of thousands or even millions. Okay, there we got a trip, which is good because otherwise he was going to bite me. Yes, a lot of the money, Roger, does come from advertisers, especially because younger generations in particular, but pretty much everybody, is sick of being bombarded with the traditional ads and such. And so what happens now is, say you watch me play this every day or a few times a week. And we have little conversations. You're a lot more likely to buy from me the way you would buy from a friend by word of mouth than you are from some random advertisement on the TV or a banner ad on the internet. The monster has been vanquished. Therefore, advertisers these days are really looking into this kind of system as a way to reach their audiences better. So they might sponsor someone like me. So I can go, oh, hey, look, the Blue Yeti microphone is wonderful. Because it is. And people will believe me. Because it's true. But they'll also pay me to say it, which is great. Now that the quest is over, I'll come back on over to our regular screen and follow up on a few more of the questions that I missed. Dagmara said, what's the secret sauce of good live streaming? I have to say, this is a wild west of an industry. Truly it is. I don't think it's figured out yet. Some of the most successful streamers are merely people who were either there early on, about 5 years ago, and who just did it a lot. Like, people will do it 18 hours a day. Now, I don't know who you are or what industry you're in, but you're probably not really doing that well if you have to work 18 hours a day. But that's really where the industry is right now. I think, similar to other media, like podcasts, like TV, like webinars, you should be able to be a high performer in this industry and maybe have like once a week show, or maybe do a few hours a week. So I think there's a lot of evolving that still needs to happen before this industry is more mature and sorted out. Right now, it is a bit of a mystery what makes it good or not. But generally, having good gaming skills as well as being either friendly or entertaining in some way is the general characteristics that you want to look for. Any final questions? I think we have about 1 minute left. What is aim slinger? I'll answer that one. That was when I was throwing those bright light balls that flashed in the face of the monster and made it get all stunned. That was what I was doing. My slinger is like a little slingshot that fires those. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed this introduction to live streaming. Maybe you'll take it up soon and make it part of your repertoire. Contest Master.
Thank you, John. All right, Mr. Timer, please, once again, give us a minute and let me know when that minute is up. Our next speaker will be Murali. Murali, do you have any logistical details that you want to discuss before we begin?
No, I already talked with Chris. We are set.
Okay. All right. So as soon as we have the all clear, we'll get you started. And Nick, by the way, if it wasn't clear, this is the part where you're supposed to be marking those categories on your ballot.
I am. I've been doing it.
Okay.
While everyone's talking, don't worry.
Right. Everybody else has been through this a dozen times, and I knew you hadn't. So.
Wait, they're scoring? I'm just kidding. It's fine.
All right. Our third speaker, and he was educating me on the pronunciation of his first name, but he goes by his last, is Murali. His speech title is Conflict Resolution. Conflict Resolution. Murali, you are on.
Good day, everyone. I'm excited to be here with you for this presentation. It is conflict resolution. A picture is not worth 100 words. Do you agree? Reply by chat to me with the word yes or no. A picture is not worth 100 words. I see a few chats with some are yes and some are no's. Now we have a conflict. Within our group, it's divided by two separate groups, one saying yes and the other one saying no for the same picture. So this is a conflict. In this presentation, we will see what is the definition of a conflict, the types of conflict, and the resolution styles. Let's start with the definition of a conflict. When two entities does not agree on one thing, it becomes a conflict. That agreement may be significantly serious, that it takes a serious effort to resolve the conflict. So this is the definition of a conflict. When I say two entities, it can be one individual and one group, or two individuals, or two groups, or a human with a different nature or society, something like that. So this is the definition of a conflict. What are the types of conflict? The literature is defining 6 types of conflict. When I say man here, it is common for man, woman, regardless of any gender. So the 6 types of conflict are man versus self. It is something we are defining yourself. The conflict is within ourselves, to do or not to do. If there is a decision to allow our child to get married to a particular lady or a man, boy, which we don't agree, and we are thinking ourselves within our head whether to yield or not yield. So that is the conflict within ourselves. Even it is common for even the mental health people also conflicting within themselves. The next one is man versus man. So this is actually between two individuals. So when I say the two individuals, it can be anything like I agree on this one, but you do not agree on this particular thing. So where are we going to meet? The third one is about man versus society. So that is an individual versus society. There are societal norms here. If that person is not agreeing on the norms of the society, there is a conflict here. Something like man versus nature. If the individual is facing with the serious natural calamities like earthquakes or a serious power breakdown or tsunami like that, so he is facing a conflict, how to resolve that? The third one is man versus, the fifth one is man versus machine. The examples are as simple as, what does this button do? Ask Jim and Chris. I have seen one AI hotel in Nagasaki, Japan, where everything is by robot. There is an information robot, there is a reception robot with a funny dinosaur head, and there are robots for clocking services, concierge services, and everything else. It is managed totally by robots. There are no humans in that. Do we see any conflict here? Yes. There are many unanswered questions here also. The last one is about man versus fate or supernaturals. So fate as well as supernaturals, and we are encountering something similar like that. So these are the 6 types of conflict with respect to how the literature is defining. But moving on to the real life conflict, there are only 4 types. The interpersonal, intrapersonal, intragroup, and intergroup. So the name itself is very obvious. What is interpersonal is two entities, two persons, or one person and another stakeholders, set of stakeholders. So intrapersonal is within themselves. Same thing like intra-group, difference of opinion within the same group, and the inter-group is difference of opinion or disagreement between two groups. So these are the real life contemporary types of conflict. Let's move on to the resolution styles. So this is the commonly used modes. This is defined by Thomas Kilmann. This has got two parameters. The first one is on the bottom, cooperativeness, and on the vertical side is assertiveness. How does this work? There are 5 quadrants on this: avoiding, accommodating, competing, collaborating, compromising. Within these 5 quadrants, one can set yourself in any quadrant and then take that style of conflict resolution. The more we accommodate, the more cooperative is this. So here is a highly cooperative position where the accommodating is, but we are compromising on the assertiveness on this scale. But if you are compromising on assertiveness as well as the cooperativeness, it is called avoiding. It is just pretending that there is no conflict and leave everything as if we are in a happy path. On the competing, I position myself on the highly assertive thing. It is my opinion. I want my opinion to be respected and made a decision on that one. It is highly competing position. Sometimes it works, but many times it spoils the relations. Collaborating. This is the most interesting and productive quadrant on this, where we are having a high assertiveness and high cooperativeness. So this is the style of conflict resolution that makes people to respect each other, and it is a win-win position for the entire episode. And there is a 5th quadrant, compromising. Both entities compromise on something. We compromise on one thing and then get the other things. So some of the things are we compromise on the less important things, and the other party also compromise on the less important things, coming up with a common ground we agree on. So these are the 5 different quarters of conflict resolution styles. Now, question to you: where do you position yourself in this? Will you be rigid enough to position in one quadrant for all types of conflict that you are encountering in your life? Or are you going to be flexible, and then depending on the type of conflict and depending on the position, that you will take the quadrant? Are you going to let your ego and your past life events influence the quadrant that you are going to set in? So these are the questions you need to reflect on yourself.
No time for questions, Murali.
Yep. As a summary, we defined the conflict, and we have seen the types of conflict, and then we have seen the different types of conflict resolution styles. Now let's move on to the questions thing.
I think your time is up.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We're going to have to go without questions and move on to the next speaker.
Thank you.
All right. Jim, once again, if you could put 1 minute on the clock. Carol Prehensky, any logistical details you need to attend to before you were introduced? Okay, so Carol's setting up her screen. Okay, here we go. Kelprahinsky, negotiations, shifting from avoidance to full engagement. Again, that's negotiations, shifting from avoidance to full engagement, Kelprahinsky.
Good evening. In continuation of our last conversation, tonight we are going to focus specifically on those individuals that like to hang out in the quadrant called avoidance. Are you one of them? As we examine the avoidance quadrant, please note that there are times we should be hanging out there. We should avoid that conversation. But there are other times we need to not avoid, we need to step out and become fully engaged with that other person that we're trying to avoid. So as we have learned already, the bargaining styles include 4 main quadrants. The avoiding style is down here in the bottom left quadrant, and this means that we're low on cooperation and low on assertiveness. We don't want to have that conversation. But there are times, as we have learned, that we need to step forward out of that quadrant to participate and become engaged with negotiations. When we are operating in this quadrant, many of the individuals that I've heard from say, I want to get out, but this tends to be the place where I like hanging out. I like hanging out here. I'm most comfortable here. I don't want to engage. Many times they say, well, if I'm going to engage, I'm going to pop over to the accommodating box. The accommodating box on the far right side means that I'm pretty much saying, yes, yes, yes. And that means that you just got signed up for a lot of things that you might not have wanted to really say yes to. When we're negotiating, there are times that we need to say no. And we need to communicate exactly what it is that we do want, not always listening to the other party on what they want. But what many people in the avoiding box fear is that comment called competitive negotiation style. We want to avoid that style because it means certain connotations to those of us in the avoiding box. It means that we have anger, perhaps, negative emotions, drama, and we're going to have to deal with it. It might mean that I'm no longer liked for being who I am because I have to deal with this competitive person. And if I behave in a competitive fashion just to get my point across, I'm not going to be liked. And then there's this collaborating box, this, everything is beautiful, we're going to have a win-win. And isn't that what all of us aspire to? There are times we should not be hanging out in that collaborative box, and that's one of the things we want to get across. But tonight, again, we're focusing on this avoiding box, and specifically, I want to ask ourselves, why do we avoid? Why do we avoid? Well, most of the time, it's for things like fear of failure. We're afraid of losing confidence. Maybe we didn't prepare well enough. We have fear of rejection. They're not going to like me anymore. I might lose my job if I actually say what I think. Or fear of poor outcome. I might lose my pride. Maybe I'm going to make the situation even worse. Lastly, there are good reasons to avoid negotiations, and because it makes sense. Perhaps you're using it as a technique to actually improve your power in that situation. If I delay and delay and delay, guess what? They start freaking out. And then I have more power in that negotiation. As we talked about, there's these different styles, and each one of them is a good for certain situations. We want to behave in a way that allows us to select the right style for the right situation and the right person that we're sitting across from. So we have to practice some of the styles that we might not be so comfortable with. And this is why many of the people in the avoiding box say, I need to get out of this box to practice and behave in a way that allows me to get that experience for when I really need to get out of that box, the important time when I need to get out of that box. So one of the things we can do is, as we're talking to these individuals, Suppose you are working with somebody who is an avoider. How do I get them out of that box? You might be asking. Well, my suggestion is listen. Listen carefully, listen closely, examine why they are avoiding. What are the reasons that they have? So we want to remove all distractions. We want to provide feedback, empathy, that we understand what they're saying. And I want to listen to every point that they make. And if I need to, I'll take notes. I want them to know that I'm hearing them. And then I want them to know that this is a safe space for us to have that conversation so that they can feel comfortable in stepping out of the avoidance box. We can have that conversation and be able to negotiate whatever that conflict is that we have. Now, here's your action plan. If you happen to be the avoider normally, I want you to try new styles. Get out of that box when you feel comfortable in doing so, but practice consciously that you're going to get out of that box. And the second the second action plan is for the other individual. Practice active listening. So if you happen to be working with an avoider, perhaps you're married to one, I want you to practice your listening skills because they need it for them to feel comfortable. Now I'm opening it up for questions. Chris, I'd love to have your comments.
All right. Carol, there's definitely been some comments here.
I saw that.
Yes. David asked, is avoidance one of the most common styles?
I don't have statistics on the different frequency for each one of these quadrants. I believe it is one of the more common ones, and the competitive style is also the one that we tend to choose on a frequent basis, just naturally. However, I'm going to extend that for a minute, Chris. I also have noticed that when we are in a face-to-face dialogue, once we get past that initial rough edge, that we tend to naturally gravitate towards the collaborative box. So if we can get past that rough moment, we can move into that collaborative box. Go ahead, Chris.
Do you think that age or generations place us in a specific box, wonders Lois?
I do not think so. I think it's personality that in our past history.
Or what about spouses? I think was a...
I can only speak for myself on that one. I'm married an avoider, and it's wonderful. I get a lot of things accomplished, but I will say that there are times that I have to sit and actively listen because I know that there are issues, and I want to make sure that they are addressed in the relationship.
Rachel says that she used to avoid difficult people, but have found if you put them on the spot, they aren't as difficult.
Good lesson, Rachel. Thank you.
Get out of that quadrant, huh?
I'm suggesting that you practice it. Practice it, and then you'll start to feel more comfortable. All of us have a quadrant that we like to avoid, and it may not be the avoidance quadrant. I happen to not be happy with the compromising quadrant down on the bottom, and I'd like to avoid that one. So occasionally I have to practice. I see that we're out of time, Chris. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up.
Okay.
I think that this is really a wonderful dialogue. I will look at your questions later, and if you have specific questions that you do want an answer to, I will get that to you. All right, if you want to contact me further, my contact information is here. My website is here. I look forward to expanding our conversation. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Carol. All right. Mr. Timer, please give us a minute on the clock. Let's see. So next up, we'll have Jim Barber. Again, Jim, any logistical details you need to get ready?
I am going to try to do a screen share, and I may need your help if I have a problem here.
Well, you want to test it and just put your screen up for a moment?
That's what I'm aiming for. Let's see.
As
this
Jim
maybe
is preparing to get his slides ready, there are a number of people who came into our room late. Just to let you know, during the speech contest, let's reserve our chat box to questions for our speaker. Please reserve any comments, answering questions. We can do that at the end and later on. Let's leave the chat box open for questions for our contestant so that they can either look at them themselves or Chris will relay those questions to our contestants later.
Okay. Our timer says we are ready. I'm going to mute everybody one more time. Except for, I will.
Is my screen showing up?
Your screen is showing up.
Cool.
So I'm going to mute everybody. I'm going to unmute you again, Jim.
All right.
And quick introduction. Jim Barber, cost-effective marketing for speaking professionals. Cost-effective marketing for speaking professionals, Jim Barber.
Hi, I'm Jim Barber, and I'm here to briefly introduce you to the exciting solution to the #1 problem facing professional speakers and other entrepreneurs: marketing. Cost-effective marketing is the challenge that keeps many entrepreneurs from getting a good night's sleep. Before I get started, as you've seen, we're doing questions. Please ask any questions you may have in the chat box, and I'll get to them as quickly as I can. But if your question doesn't get answered, which is quite likely, you can please go to thebarbershop.com/askjim. And I'll get back, I'll answer all of your questions. This is after the meeting, of course. I'll answer all of your questions that way. Now, let's get started. The first solution to your marketing problem is wise words. Wise words is could I have a drum roll, please? Database of quotations. Wow. The internet is already filled with hundreds of databases of thousands of quotations. The problem is, they're all filled with the same old tired quotes from the same old tired, frequently dead sources. That's where wise words is different. There are no quotations by Lincoln, Churchill, Mark Twain, or anybody else like that. Instead, wise words offers insights on today's issues from today's thought leaders like you. Do you really want to be associated with the famous people of yesterday? Wise words enables you to rub elbows with the influencers of today. But there's another marketing opportunity that you need to consider. Finder speakers. Finder speakers is where planners go to find and hire speakers for their events. In other words, Finder speakers is a speakers directory. Wow again. Of course, there are thousands of speakers directories out there. What makes Finder speakers different? Well, every pro speaker knows the importance of standing out from the crowd, of promoting their uniqueness. Unfortunately, most online directories limit you to a single listing. They also limit the number of words you can use to describe yourself. Worst of all, your listing is limited by using a cookie-cutter template. How can you stand out from the crowd when your listing looks like everybody else's? That's where Finder Speakers is different. Your multiple listings, and I'll explain multiple in a few moments, are fully customizable, and there's no limit on how long each entry can be. That means that each of your listings in Finder Speakers will be as unique as you are. Now, as the infomercials say, but wait, there's more. The Barbershop Bookstore is, are you ready? An online retail site. Wow. Why is this different? Well, for one thing, almost all e-tail sites, when you're selling on them, they require that you pay them a commission, 30, 40, even 50% on everything you sell. Even worse, in the case of Amazon books, for example, to name a little one, they don't even tell you who's buying your product. You can build your list, but you can't build your list if you don't know who your customers are. Not the Barbershop Bookstore. All sales are commission-free, and all sales are between you and your customers. Our feeling is, it's your customer, it's your money. You've earned them. You keep them. Simple as that. All of which brings me to the first of two questions. How can I take advantage of these marketing opportunities? The answer is Speaker Promo. Becoming a member of Speaker Promo gives you full control over Are you ready for this? 13 promo pages for promoting yourself in Finder Speakers and the bookstore, or both. And you get 27 entries in wise words, so you can inspire and dazzle your customers and clients with your own unique insights on the important issues of the day. Which leads me to the second question: how much does all this cost? You get 13 fully customizable, unlimited length promotional pages in Finder Speakers and the bookstore, and 27 individual listings in wise words for only $9 a month. That's it. $9 a month with no contracts to sign, no long-term commitments. You can drop your membership at any time with no penalty. Now, you have an opportunity, but I have a problem. All of this is brand new. You're among the very first people to hear about it, but my advisors all agree on two things. First, it's a great product. It'll be very popular. I'm glad to hear that. But the second is that charging $9 is too little. They tell me that people won't take it serious at that price, and I need to increase the membership fee for credibility. Unfortunately, they don't agree on what I should charge. So here's my pledge to you. I'm going to raise the prices, but I'm not going to increase the charter member rate. $9 it stands right now, and it'll stay for as long as you remain a member. That's it. Carol, Chris, I've got a little bit of time for questions. Anything?
Okay. There definitely are some. First, Carol Perhinsky says, I'm a huge fan of Phyllis May. Does she know that you mentioned her in this presentation?
She will know after this webinar.
And is Wise Words an organization or a website? Or
it's a website. Okay. Wise Words, Finder Speakers, and the Barbershop Bookstore are all websites.
Okay. And
I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to cut it off here so we come in on time. I want to make a closing statement. As you can see, I'm excited about Speaker Promo. And if you agree that you'll get far more than $9 in benefit from promoting your business in those websites, and you want to protect yourself from future price increases, then you need to join Speaker Promo as a charter member. I'm Jim Barber, and in all your marketing endeavors, I wish you every success. Mr. Contest Master.
Thank you, Jim. Mr. Timer, please put a moment on the clock. And Jim, if you could stop screen sharing, please.
Yes.
There we go. Say, Norman, do you have any logistical details? Anything you need to practice or communicate to the chat monitor?
No, I will take questions at the end. Let me share my screen.
Sure.
Let's see, where are we? Share screen. That should be easy.
Done it before, right? The green button down the bottom.
What's going on here? I'm sorry.
Take your time. We want you to get it right.
Okay.
So it's the green button down the bottom. It says share screen, and I usually just share the whole desktop, and then
That's
maneuver
hidden.
over.
That button is hidden unless you go mouse over it. Go slide your mouse down from the middle of the screen down to the bottom, and it'll appear.
Okay, I'm sliding my mouse down, and I'm not seeing a darn thing. Oh, shucks.
Are you using more than one monitor, or?
No, I have one monitor. Okay. Well, I don't want to hold up the time. Let me just,
What about pressing Alt-S?
pardon me?
Or making
Alt-S?
speaker view full screen, and then you get the share screen down at the bottom.
Let's try one more thing. Yeah, I've somehow blown this tremendously. Okay, Chris. Okay, well,
Is it something you think you can present without slides?
yeah, let me just go ahead and do it without the slides.
All right.
Okay. I'm going to.
So let me introduce you properly. So this will be Norman Dow. His speech title is Pioneer Reimagining the Black Church. Pioneer Reimagining the Black Church, Norman Dow.
Okay, well, thank you. I'll welcome you to this webinar, Pioneer Reimagining the Black Church. And well, who's the audience for this? Well, this is about inviting people to pioneer with me, starting a new Black church. But it's for Christians who want to grow and to serve, who want an Afrocentric flavor to their actual faith journey. You know, the guys who would prefer jazz to classical, or blues to country western, or perhaps even Dr. Martin Luther King, as opposed to Dr. Billy Graham. Well, why me? Why listen to me? Well, I've spent 40 years in ministry. I'm a Black church historian. I've planted 3 churches. I've written, What Does God Want Me to Do? A book on identifying God's call in your life. I'm a teacher, preacher, pastor, and entrepreneur. The goals of this webinar are to explain the benefits of being part of reimagining the Black church. Well, there are actually 3 dimensions of benefits. There's an inward benefit, an upward benefit, and an outward benefit. The inward benefit is all about being a disciple. That's really a fancy word for apprenticing one's faith. To be a disciple, one needs to be conscious or happy with the way God made you, saved from sin, filled with the Holy Spirit, free from any stronghold, and then serving in the particular ministry that God has called you to. In the vertical dimension, we are actually talking about learning how to communicate to God, to hear from God, how to praise and worship God, and then, of course, how to obey Him. And then in the outward dimension, we're talking about engaging each other in a family, forming prayer bands where we can pray for one another. We will teach you how to pray for one another and to how to collectively pray for concerns outside of your little group, your prayer band. And then we will also teach you how to identify what God is calling you to do, support you in preparing yourself to obey God, and even to actually do what God has called you to do, even if that means starting another church. Well, you say, well, oh, that sounds nice, and none of it sounds particularly cultural. Why Black church? Well, there's certain differences, exceptions, but in general, these are some comparisons why I say Black church. In the white church, the speaker tends to want to inform or to educate or to motivate, where the Black preacher is usually trying to conform someone's life to the truth of the message. In the white church, there's usually a focus on salvation and individual sin. Now, that happens in the Black church also, but there's also a focus on systemic injustice and social justice. In the white church, we tell the story of God through Eurocentric eyes. And in the black church, we tell the story of God through Asian and African eyes. In the white church, there is a focus on obeying the truth. And in the black church, there's a focus on crying out to God and then doing what he said. I kind of like my flavor, and I would invite you to become part of the flavor. Now, I've introduced the benefits of being part of a reimagined church, the upward, the inward, and the outward. If you're intrigued, I would invite you to go to equippingchurch.org and sign up, or email me or message or chat. If you really like what's going on and you'd like to engage further, if you actually send me a message, sign up on equippingchurch.org or take the Bible Knowledge Quiz, I will give you a book, an electronic copy of a book. It's called The Abrogation of the Seventh Commandment by the American Churches. It was written by a 19th century prophet. His name was David Ruggles. He was actually a man who was the mentor for Frederick Douglass. Just as I'm saying thank you for being engaged in, let's look at our faith with a little more flavor than is customary. Are there any questions? I can't see anything, so I'll have to hear the questions.
Sure. I got some for you here. So David mentions, why does the black church need to be reimagined? Are there things you believe are not working with the black church today?
Yes, well, thank you, David. It needs to be reimagined because we have not effectively changed radically with the times. I'll give you an example. My pastor came into the ministry before Brown v. Board of Education, 6 years before schools were segregated. He just died last year. What has happened in America in that time? There's a radical shift, and the church has not kept up with the radical shift.
And do you have a view of an online church, an online only church?
I would believe that the online part needs to be a supplement, but there is something that's really vital about the actual face-to-face encounter. Online is a wonderful way of having meetings and things of that nature, but the actual fellowship and worship and all that, that needs to be face-to-face.
Okay. And you mentioned a seventh commandment. What is the seventh commandment?
Thou shalt not commit adultery.
Uh-huh.
And David Ruggles actually challenged the church and the antebellum church. He was an abolitionist, that you are actually setting aside the seventh commandment by permitting facilitating slavery.
If the true is eternal, asks Sam, how does it change? Why do we need to reinvent it if the true is eternal?
The truth is eternal, but it's given, theology is how people understand God, and that's always through their culture. So the actual real principles are there, but there will be differences in the particular cultures. We see that in the Bible, and we see that today. It was different when Paul was dealing with the Greeks and Peter was dealing with the Jews. There's a culture that has to be involved. Okay, and we're out of time. Thank you very, very much.
All right. Thank you, Norman. Norman was our final speaker. Now, traditionally, we have 2 minutes of silence while the judges complete their ballots and vote. We're actually using an online voting system that maybe will save us a little time, so Roger will let us know if we are ready sooner than that.
As a reminder to all of our judges, both celebrity judges and the secret judges, The pointing system on your page will help you sort them. However, you must finalize by voting specifically first, second, and third place in your unique page. Our tiebreaker judge will have to rank each and every contestant. If there's a tie, you need to make that break that tie in terms of 1, 2, and 3. For our tiebreaker judge, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Thank you, Roger. All right. So in a moment, we'll see whether the techie system actually worked. But
This is Roger. If I have a tie at third place,
you break the tie. You make your decision about how to break the tie. So sorry for the dead air. This is the awkward part of an in-person Toastmasters contest as well. But
I was going to put up some elevator music. or I can do some karaoke right now. We have 2 more. We need 2 more judges to finish.
Okay.
I like the idea of the Jeopardy music.
Well, you can hum it for us if you like it, Chris. Yeah. See, this would get us all disqualified if this was a formal contest, but but this is just for fun. Well, I mean, and I hope we're going to learn something from it as well. So, Mr. Timer, do give me a warning at 2 minutes.
Note to all the judges, I just sent a private message to one last judge to respond. And that judge, I need him or her to finalize their vote. If you run into any issue, you can use a private chat and just send me the 3 names, 1, 2, and first place, second place, third place.
Oh. I'm sorry, Roger, I unmuted you. I think you were done. All right, we do have a green light. If you don't mind, I'm going to ask our celebrity guest judges to give a little bit of feedback if they are ready to do so. Roger Corville, would you like to tell us a little bit about what you saw tonight? Actually, before we do that, I want to make one comment. This reminds me a little bit of the pilot saying any landing you can walk away from is a good landing. This was all an experiment. This was the 6 to 8 minutes, I think, is a very tight time limit. And I came up with that partly because I tried to do something like this in 5 to 7 minutes, and I ran out of time for questions, and then to try and come back from the questions and give some kind of a wrap-up statement. It's a tough challenge, and I want to commend all of our judges, or all of our contestants for taking it on tonight. So, Roger Corville, can we ask you to give a little bit of feedback on what you saw and what folks might want to work on improving?
You bet, and I'll start with a question. Wonderful job, everybody. I realize that everybody has different levels of experience in this kind of thing, and I am not trying to do the sandwich method, but it'll come out like that. Let me start with a question. If you put yourself in the shoes of your virtual audience, is the experience they are having more like an in-person seminar or speech, or is their experience more like watching television or movies? And I want to share that in the context of this. we have, I think, an additional responsibility when we move into the virtual world to become directors of attention. And that can happen in a number of ways. For instance, in the case of Norman, didn't get the slides working. To me, that doesn't mark you down. But there's a question of where and how do we cater to how attention works, one piece of which is visual change. We know from cognitive science that visual change gets attention. So for those of you who used slides, for instance, one of the things that I would share is that being cognizant of how quickly or how the frequency with which you can push the next slide button. So for instance, is there a slide where you have multiple pieces on a slide and you could build that out over multiple slides, whether you use animations or that kind of thing? I will say this, however, if there is, to me, one of the most potent elements of what and how we do what we do, it is in thinking analogically about how we adapt what we do offline into how we move online. And I want to encourage you to think about it in this way. Think about the tactic you would use offline, then adapt it for the medium, meaning adapt it to the tools that you have, and then think about what you could do new, unique, or different online. And let me give you an example by way of a positive example. When Jim was showing you something different than PowerPoint, I'm thinking, hey, that's awesome, right? You can show anything. It doesn't have to be PowerPoint. It doesn't have to be anything at all, as we saw with Norm. But when Jim started, he goes, hey, boom, here's something that you can see, which was beautiful. But Jim could have also gone copy, paste, and dropped that into the chat in a manner that made that a hot link that would take you right there. So I am really excited about the fact that you have come a heck of a long way in the course of the time that you've been together. I would encourage each of you to reach out to me if you have. I will not send you a bill if you want to call me and spend a little time on the phone. That's what I've done for the last 19 years. So in the chat is a link to the free book. And David, back to you. Good job, everybody.
Excellent.
You muted yourself, David.
Oh, good.
All
I thought
right.
that was me.
No.
Wait,
that was me. That was me
what
introducing you, Cheryl. Yeah.
And
So
what did
Cheryl,
you say?
you came to talk with us about how to connect with any audience not too long ago. How did our speakers tonight connect with you or with your audience?
I think overall it was fascinating to see how each of the contestants presented from their preferred communication channels. So to recap, and for my fellow celebrity judges who may not have been familiar with that, although Roger, I kind of have a feeling you are aware of this. So the first group is linguistic, where it's a choice of words, including the semantics. We heard some incredible phrases, including from Norman. I wrote them down. It's like, wow, haven't heard that phrase. Then there's mathematical, logical, scientific, and facts. We heard a lot of numbers today. I do have a couple of tips for the individual speakers in how to implement more numbers into the headlines when there is a list of things, and as Roger had said, to build the transitions into the slides for that. The third modality or communication channel is visual. So for instance, John with the streaming video, for me that was a first. I'm not a gamer, but I am a cat lady. So I did appreciate the opening on that. And Norman, again, back to you, and seeing your slides now, you rocked your presentation without the slides. I was fascinated just how you brought all that together. The fourth group is musical. So thank you for the Jeopardy theme song while we were waiting for the judging. And maybe there's other ways to bring in musical. Often it's done with a cadence with which we speak. The vocal variety, which is part of the judging for tonight, is the voice. What is the enthusiasm? What's the manner? What's your range in it? And definitely avoiding I think the big thing on podcasting is to avoid the monotone. I think all the judges and everyone online would agree with that. kinesthetic has to do with the body, with the senses, with the physical. I hope that most of us were taking notes. That would be something kinesthetic. When we are putting things into the chat box, typing things up, there's hands-on, very active movement. The kinesthetic can tie back into the visual that we're watching the screens and we're participating with the engagement. And then the sixth group are the interpersonal people, again, the chat. It also has to do with the conversation that we're having with our virtual audience and being fully present with them, anticipating the questions. Or perhaps you might be asking yourself at this point, again, almost rhetorical, where it's implied relevance and brings us in. Intrapersonal or introspective brings us in, and perhaps in that 1 minute of silence while the balloting was happening, that you were processing and assimilating the information. So both online and in person, we need to bring in all 7 of these multiple intelligences. So it's interesting, and if you'd like feedback to the individuals, if we go through that, David, I'd be happy to share how those 7 secrets to connect showed up. I thought it was great to pay attention as online presenters.
All right, fantastic, thank you. And finally, I want to hear from Nick as well. Nick, you're supposed to be in charge of giving us practical feedback from the perspective of somebody who regularly does marketing webinars. And now, not everybody here was selling something per se, but we would love to hear from you about what you saw.
First, congratulations, David, on not muting yourself this time. That was awesome. So the feedback I give you is, first of all, everyone did a really great job. I was really surprised at how well the presentations went, the thoughts were put together, the various ways you wanted to present it. Even Norman, right down to, I'm going to reiterate what everyone else said, even without slides, you did a great job. Don't have to worry about that. What I find with webinars, because I'm doing, 2 to 3 a week on the average, and the ones I normally do in a lot of cases, and actually most of the cases, at least in the tech industry, we don't have a lot of this visual face-to-face. It's purely a slide deck. And so what happens is, the way that I'm going to interact with the audience is I have to use a lot of my voice. They have to hear a lot of our different articulation of my voice, a lot of variants. They have to really hear. In fact, one of the things that was said in the voice was actually, I think it was actually under manner, and it was like I forget the verbiage here, I'm trying to find it in here, but it was basically to kind of get a sense of that's really the real you. And I would tell you, if you listen to Cheryl, and you listen to myself, and Roger, right? Roger, yes. I was going to call him Richard for some reason. That's the wrong name, isn't it? It is Roger, right? You got that right? Okay.
Yeah, just not late for dinner.
Thank you very much. Fine, thank you. Appreciate the grace there. We're all slightly above what we normally are. None of us go like, yeah, I'd love to get some gas in my car. That'd be awesome. And we don't do that. But this is our personality. We're just making it a little more pronounced because there's this disconnect that exists just because we're virtual. And so one of your jobs is, when you're doing a webinar, is you're trying to emotionally connect with the audience. And some of you did a real good job by trying to set the tone for like the problem, and maybe you're exacerbating the problem at the beginning, and maybe the emotional connection is something negative, and that's okay. Not negative in a negative connotation, but negative in the, don't you hate when you have to, and you kind of get people, yeah, I hate that. And then we start to get this little bit of an emotional connection, and then we can talk about how to resolve it, which is one of the things here at the end. One of the ways we're supposed to judge was based on the call to action. And so in some ways it's sort of exacerbate the problem, give them some ways to fix it, give them a call to action, so there's some final actions at the end. Your visuals always make a big difference. I myself, I do one of two things. Either I'm doing a very discussion-oriented format where I'm talking with some other industry folks, and so the visuals are very light. But we tell the audience up front. We tell them, all right, these are very light on the slides. This is more you're listening to us have the conversation, so just sit back, relax, don't worry about what's on the screen, that kind of thing. And then the other end of that is something where there's animations in PowerPoint and transitions, which do help you move some things around in a very animated way and so on. PowerPoint and the like is a very powerful tool. And then the last thing here that I think I want to talk about here is one of the ways to really engage with your audience is how you talk. And I'm going to give you 3 ways of how you talk, and you can think about this yourself and decide which one applies to you, and then try to see which way you should be doing it. And I'm going to kind of make it obvious. The first one is you're talking at your audience. And for some of you, you were covering a topic and you were simply talking about the topic. And so you were talking at the audience. It's not entirely bad, but there's some better ways to engage the audience. The next one is talking to the audience. And I heard some of you doing it, particularly with the questions, where when a question was read out and it said, David asked, and you would say, well, David, and you would talk to David. And you would actually answer the question. That makes David feel like you're talking to him. The other thing that could be done is I heard some of you say, for example, it was, one second here, it was Carol. Carol started using the word we a lot, and then at the end she started shifting to you. And the we is like a word that if they say, well, we need to do this and we need to do that, people can't personally associate with it. But if you say you need to do that, they start realizing, oh, you're talking to me. So it's a bit of semantics, but it helps get the audience to really feel like they're connected with you. And then the last one is talking with the audience. And this is where you're really trying to make sure that the audience feels like you're talking to them. And it's a bit of, I think it's a bit of a developed skill. I don't think you're born with it. You just learn it and you have to develop it. It's one where there were some of you that even asked questions during. That's a great example of talking with the audience, but really doing it in a way where the audience feels like you're having a dialogue. And I give you an example. If I was going to take a question, maybe we're just talking about making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and someone said, do you think getting out the peanut butter is important first or the jellies first? And it was from a woman named Samantha. I might say, Samantha, it kind of depends, and I would kind of give an answer, and maybe I'd even ask her a question and say, but put something back in the Q&A box. Did you mean that you're worried about, like, if the jelly's going to get warm because you took it out of the refrigerator, or are you just trying to figure out which one should go on first, or what's your issue? And now I'm actually talking with Samantha, and then she really feels like I'm really engaging her. And it's a really important, hey, it happens. You got to come up with some example, David.
Nick, we didn't warn you that we were timing you on this, and we were trying to hold these to about 5 minutes.
Sorry about that.
This is all great material. You could talk to us all day. And maybe we need to invite you back for that reason.
Yeah, but that was my last slide. So.
Right. So you guys have all heard about the mute all button. There's also, guess what, an unmute all button. I'm going to unmute everybody so we can give a big round of applause to all our guest judges. And all the other judges who are absolutely as important. Yay! And for our timer, Jim Gold. Yay, Jim! And chat monitor, Chris Gold. Ballot counter, Dag Mara. Chief Judge Roger Fung. And now, Roger, I believe you have some announcements to make. I better mute everybody again. You can unmute yourself, Roger. And
thank you, Contest Master. And thank you for all of the participants, our contestants, our judges, our celebrity judges. And here I'd like to announce to all of you our winner. I guess you can take a peek now. It's already in there. At third place, Norman, our second place winner. Actually, you can unmute everybody, David. You can unmute everybody. We can hear them clap.
Okay. All right. Well,
so let's give a hand to Norman, the third place.
First place. It's not up yet.
At second place, Jim Barber. And at first place in our first ever meeting webinar contest is Carol.
Hey, Carol.
Oh, my day is made. My day is made. Thank you.
All right.
My week is made.
All right.
How do you get ribbons here?
Yeah, I'll take the trophy.
It's all virtual, I'm afraid. But
need badges. Badges.
You know, actually, I wanted to. I warned everybody this would run to about 9:30. We're a little bit past that, but I'd still like to take a moment to hear from our first place winner, Carol Brahansky. Tell us a little bit about what you learned from this process, maybe from preparing for it and from participating in it.
I learned that I was nervous beforehand. And I also learned that I'm totally swamped and my bandwidth isn't there. So I looked at the list of who is signed up and I said, oh my God, I'm the only woman. So it goes back to Coach Carol's comment earlier that there was hardly any women signed up. There had been, and for whatever reason they needed to drop off. So I was like, I have to represent all women. I've got to be on, and I better get my acting gear. So I spent today working on that webinar. I even brought my students into the conversation. I presented part of it today at one of my classes, and they were able to give me some feedback on who avoids and why. So I actually spent a lot of time on this today.
You did us proud, Carol.
Oh, I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful. Yes.
Great job, sister.
Oh, thank you, Sparkle.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for this
This
event.
was well done. Thanks for your vision on this, David. Thank you.
I wanted people to let me know whether you think it was something that we should do again.
Yes.
I think there's the format that other clubs might experiment with trying as well. I do have a couple of commercials. The timing tool is now part of WordPress for Toastmasters, and I posted a link to a blog post about that. And I'm also doing my own WordPress for Toastmasters webinar on April 25th. So help me spread the word about those things. Anything else we need to address before we wrap up for the evening? Thank you so much.
Happy birthday, David. Happy birthday Saturday.
Okay.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, David.
All right. Well, I refuse to get older, but